The order appears while traffic is barely moving. $4.25. 6 miles across Los Angeles. The phone makes it look simple. Accept or decline. But on the back seat, there is another story. A dusty college diploma. A rolled design portfolio. A few empty delivery bags. And a young man trying not to panic. He spent 4 years preparing for a stable creative career. He learned software, color theory, branding, and client presentations. He believed skill would turn into security. Then the market changed faster than his plan. An email arrived on a quiet January morning. The agency was cutting staff. The message was polite, short, and impossible to argue with. Basic design work had become cheaper. Artificial intelligence tools had become faster. Clients wanted more options, lower prices, and shorter deadlines. The company called it restructuring. He called it the day his future lost shape. At first, he did what everyone tells you to do. He updated his resume. He refreshed his portfolio. He opened job boards before breakfast. He applied to anything that looked close enough. Junior roles, contract roles, remote roles, freelance listings with cheerful headlines. But the screen did not feel like opportunity anymore. It felt like a crowd pressing against one narrow door. Every listing had hundreds of applicants. Every freelance project had dozens of people bidding lower. Every platform promised freedom. But freedom started to feel strangely crowded. That is the first quiet truth. The gig economy no longer looks like a side hustle dream. For many people, it looks like a waiting room. A waiting room with rent due. A waiting room with student debt. A waiting room where the algorithm keeps calling your name. So he turned on the delivery app. Not because he had no ambition. Not because he gave up on design. Because the electric bill was not waiting for confidence. Because the landlord did not accept potential. Because groceries had to be bought before the perfect job appeared. The app gave him an instant answer. Drive here. Pick this up. Drop it there. Maybe earn enough to breathe tonight. At first, that felt useful. Almost calming. After weeks of unanswered applications, a task was a task. The map gave him direction. The customer gave him a destination. The payout gave him a number. It was not a career, but it was movement. And movement can feel like control when life becomes foggy. Then the math started speaking. Gas took its part. Car maintenance waited quietly in the background. Self-employment taxes became another invisible hand. Insurance, phone bills, parking tickets, and slow traffic all joined in. The number on the app looked bigger than the number he kept. Some nights he made money. Some nights he only moved money from tomorrow into today. That is the trap. The app shows income. Life shows net income. And the difference can break your confidence slowly. Nobody sees that part. They see someone driving. They see someone picking up bags. They see someone working whenever he wants. But they do not see the mental spreadsheet running all day. How much gas did this route cost? Was that order worth accepting? What if the next hour is better? What if declining this one hurts future offers? What if stopping now means falling behind? This is how freedom becomes a leash. Not a metal leash. A quiet one. Made of notifications, ratings, and uncertain income. The old office had a manager. The app had something colder. A score. A response rate. A customer rating. A warning that sounded neutral but felt personal. One delayed order could turn into a bad review. One traffic jam could become a punishment. One confused customer could affect future access to work. There was no meeting room to explain. No human supervisor to understand the context. Just a screen that measured behavior. The strange part is that he still kept checking it, even when it made him anxious. Especially when it made him anxious. Because unstable systems train people to watch them constantly. He checked while eating. He checked while parking. He checked while brushing his teeth. He checked when he already knew there was nothing new. That small habit mattered. The phone stopped being a tool. It became the room he lived inside. His apartment grew quieter. The desk where he once sketched logos became a storage surface. Receipts collected near the laptop. Coffee cups appeared beside unpaid bills. His portfolio stayed open in a browser tab for days. Not because he was lazy, because every creative task required emotional space. And survival work was using all of it. People often misunderstand this kind of exhaustion. They think tired means sleepy. But there is another kind of tired. The kind that comes from being undecided all day. Every hour becomes a question. Should I drive? Should I apply? Should I rest? Should I learn a new skill? Should I lower my price again? Should I answer my mother's call? Should I pretend everything is improving? The mind does not collapse loudly. It gets crowded. It becomes full of unfinished calculations. And when the mind is crowded, even simple decisions feel heavy. One night his mother called. Her name lit up on the phone. He looked at it until the screen went dark. He loved her. He wanted to answer. But he did not want the question. How is work going? That question used to be normal. Now it felt like a test. Not because she was judging him, because he was already judging himself. This is where isolation begins. Not with dramatic loneliness, with avoided calls, with shorter replies, with pretending to be busy, with eating alone in the car because going home feels too still. Without an office, the day loses its edges. No coworker asks about lunch. No casual joke interrupts the afternoon. No hallway conversation reminds you that you exist outside productivity. The world shrinks to a 6-inch screen. Map. Offer. Rating. Balance. Repeat. And slowly, even rest begins to feel suspicious. He would lie in bed and watch the ceiling. The room was dark. The phone still glowed beside him. A notification could arrive at any moment. A better order. A new client message. A job alert. A chance. That is the cruel side of flexible work. When work can happen anytime, guilt can happen anytime. A movie becomes lost income. A walk becomes delayed progress. A quiet dinner becomes one more hour not used. The promise was freedom from schedules. The result was a schedule with no ending. But the deeper problem was not the delivery app. It was not only artificial intelligence. It was not one company, one platform, or one bad week. The deeper problem was identity. He had attached his worth to a professional title. Designer. Agency employee. Creative specialist. Stable worker. Someone with a plan. When the title disappeared, he did not just lose income. He lost the mirror he used to recognize himself. That is why the pain felt so personal. A job loss can look financial from outside. Inside, it can feel like a language disappearing. How do you describe yourself at a family table? How do you explain a temporary job that keeps becoming less temporary? How do you stay proud while doing work you never planned for? These questions do not fit neatly on a budget sheet, but they shape every choice. For months, he fought reality by comparing it to the old plan. At 22, he imagined a clean ladder. Entry role, promotion, better apartment, better clients, more stability. At 27, the ladder looked broken, and he kept trying to climb the memory of it. That was exhausting, because you cannot build a future using a map from a different economy. This is where it changed. Not suddenly. Not with a viral success story. Not with one perfect opportunity. It changed on an ordinary morning. He stood at the bathroom sink, cold water on his face, the phone charging beside the mirror. Another day waiting to become a crisis. Then he said something simple. This is my survival job. It is not my identity. That sentence did not fix his life, but it separated the work from the wound. There is power in naming things accurately. Delivery work paid bills. It did not define his intelligence. Low-paying gigs covered time. They did not measure his creative worth. Rejected applications showed market pressure. They did not prove personal failure. This was not positive thinking. It was cleaner thinking. Not louder. Clearer. He stopped pretending the situation was easy. But he also stopped letting it describe his whole self. That was the beginning of radical acceptance. Not giving up. Not approving of every unfair condition. Not smiling through stress. Radical acceptance means seeing reality without adding extra self-punishment. Rent is high. The market is crowded. AI has changed basic creative work. Freelance platforms reward speed and price pressure. Those facts are heavy enough. He did not need to add, so I am worthless. That extra sentence was the real poison. So he made the first practical change. He stopped applying everywhere. Instead of 20 rushed applications a week, he chose 2 strong ones. He researched each company. He rewrote each message carefully. He sent work that showed judgment, not panic. It felt slower, but it returned a sense of craftsmanship. Panic makes everything feel urgent. Craft requires selection. He also changed how he used the apps. He set work blocks, morning driving, afternoon applications, evening skill building. 8 at night became a boundary. Not a perfect boundary, a human one. At 8, the delivery app closed. The job boards closed. The endless tabs closed. The phone went across the room. At first, silence felt uncomfortable. His nervous system kept reaching for the next signal. But after several nights, the silence changed. It became space. Space to cook a cheap meal slowly. Space to wash dishes without a podcast running. Space to open a notebook. Space to remember that life was not only income generation. That small choice mattered. Then came the second shift. He stopped buying hope from the internet. Not all courses were bad. Not all advice was fake. But desperate people are easy to sell to. Every ad knew his fear. Learn this skill. Beat AI. Make 6 figures. Escape the algorithm. Start today. The promises were bright. His bank account was not. So he went somewhere almost forgotten. The public library. A place without an upsell. A place where nobody asked for his email. A place where knowledge did not shout. He found books about project management, small business operations, local marketing, design systems, client communication. He sat at a wooden table under soft light. Around him were students, retirees, workers, and quiet strangers. Nobody knew his rating. Nobody knew his debt. Nobody cared whether he had a perfect career story. For the first time in months, he felt like a person in a room. Not a profile. Not a driver icon. Not a bid on a screen. A person. That matters more than people admit. The third shift was strategic. He stopped competing where AI was strongest. Online basic logo offers had become a race to the bottom. Cheaper. Faster. More revisions. More templates. More noise. So he looked closer to the ground. Local bakeries. Small repair shops. Family restaurants. Barbershops. Neighborhood stores with outdated menus and handwritten signs. These businesses did not need a global branding agency. They needed someone patient enough to listen. Someone who could stand inside the shop and notice the real problem. The menu was confusing. The window sign was hard to read. The takeout flyer looked cluttered. The owner had taste but not time. That was a work a template could not fully understand. Not because technology is useless, but because context lives in details. The smell of bread in the morning. The older customer squinting at the price board. The owner explaining family history behind a logo. The awkward corner where a poster blocks the light. These details do not always fit inside a prompt box. He started small. 1 bakery menu. 1 cleaned up sign. 1 simple flyer. 1 neighborhood recommendation. No glamorous launch. No huge breakthrough. Just proof that his skills still had a place. And that place was closer than he expected. This is the healthier idea of control. Not controlling the whole economy. Not controlling every algorithm. Not controlling whether every client says yes. Yes. Control became smaller, but more real. Control was choosing which market to enter. Control was protecting 1 evening hour. Control was separating identity from temporary work. Control was building 1 human relationship at a time. Control was making the next step specific enough to take. The modern economy often sells scale as the only goal. More reach. More followers. More applications. More platforms. More speed. But sometimes the way back is smaller. A clearer offer. A local conversation. A stronger boundary. A skill applied where it still feels human. A week planned around energy, not panic. This does not make the struggle disappear. He still had bills. He still drove some mornings. He still had days when fear returned. But fear was no longer the manager of everything. There is a difference between being under pressure and being owned by pressure. Pressure says this is difficult. Being owned says this is who you are. He learned to hear the difference. By the end of the year, his life did not look like a motivational poster. No luxury apartment. No sudden fortune. No perfect career comeback. Just a small system that made him less fragile. Delivery work for survival. Focused applications for long-term options. Local design projects for dignity. Library learning for growth. Evening boundaries for sanity. None of it looked dramatic. That was why it worked. Most real recovery is not cinematic. It is repetitive. It is boring in the best way. It is a person keeping one promise to himself, then keeping another, then adjusting when the plan breaks. The lesson of 2026 is not that everyone must quit platforms. It is not that AI is evil. It is not that traditional careers are dead. The lesson is more personal. When the economy becomes unstable, identity must become deeper than employment. Your job can change. Your title can disappear. Your income source can shift. Your platform access can become uncertain. But your value cannot depend entirely on systems you do not control. That does not mean money is unimportant. Money is very real. Rent is real. Debt is real. Food is real. Health is real. Pretending otherwise would be dishonest. But financial pressure becomes even heavier when it steals your entire sense of self. The goal is not to become untouched by stress. The goal is to stop letting stress write your biography. A temporary job is not a life sentence. A low season is not proof of low value. A crowded market is not a verdict on your talent. A slow rebuild is still a rebuild. On a quiet evening, he stood near the ocean. Santa Monica was fading into orange light. The wind moved across his face. He held coffee from his scratched thermos. Nothing about the moment looked impressive. No expensive watch. No dramatic announcement. No perfect answer. But his shoulders were lower. His breathing was steadier. For the first time in months, he was not asking the world to name him. He was learning to name himself. A worker. A designer. A learner. A person in transition. A person still here. And maybe that is the real control. Not making life predictable, but becoming steady enough to meet it. Not proving you never fell, but refusing to let one fall become your entire story. So if tomorrow your current way of earning disappeared, what would remain? What skill would still belong to you? What habit would protect you? What relationship would still be real? What part of you would not vanish with an account, a title, or a rating? That question is uncomfortable, but it is also freeing. Because once you stop letting unstable systems define your whole worth, you can rebuild differently. Not faster, not louder, better aimed, and sometimes better aimed is the beginning of a real life again.